I apologize, but we are unable to just distribute cash to any individual who enters the bank. Management, Jessica Keller spoke in a dripping voice, condescendingly as she shoved the withdrawing slit back of a black woman, particularly not across the counter, some similar like this. Their words reverberated through Meridian's marble lobby. Flagship Branch's financials as a circle of employees had created a single young lady. Whispering, she leaned over to her coworker. Simply loud enough to be heard? Isn't that correct? She doesn't even appear to possess that. Kind of the gathering erupted in laughter at money. When the black CEO in disguise, Angela, stood there honor unharmed but humiliated by the second thing that these workers failed to do, knew that everything was going to change regarding their lives, occupations, and this bank for all time when the woman they believed wasn't worthy of taking back her own, her true identity was exposed by money. Have you ever faced criticism from others, didn't even know your name or identity? The most fulfilling example is provided by the story. This year, you'll witness instant karma. And if you think everyone ought to be treated equally and with respect, regardless of what color is their skin, comment with respect. First, in the space provided for comments and press, click the subscribe button to start the article. When a sophisticated black woman stood quietly, her posture was straight at the counter. Despite being calm, her expression encircled by bank employees whose faces varied from contemptuous to overtly. However, Angela Freeman made fun of this. None of the staff members acknowledged her 25 years prior to that embarrassing incident in Angela Freeman was standing in the bank lobby, behind a separate counter, dressed in outfit that was ironed and a name tag that said teller trainee's path from the executive suite's location is nothing at all. Angela's remarkable origins weren't. Her wealth or connections were determination, intelligence, and a steadfast work ethic that drove her through Meridian Financial's ranks from the branch's teller to the loan officer manager to Angela, the regional director, mastered each part she played along the way. How she obtained her Harvard MBA LED quarters that break records in three many divisions and created a repute as the expert in solving problems who help revive branches that are having trouble. As chief, she arrived at the C-suite, operations officer 5 years prior. A lot believed she had struck the glass ceiling. 3 months ago, they were mistaken when the CEO of Meridian declared his retirement. The directors' board discovered at an intersection, in spite of Angela's flawless qualifications and 20 years of devoted service, a number of board members stated worries on her ability to take the lead in private sessions. These issues appear to pay less attention to her credentials and further details on whether significant clients would be at ease with her dark complexion as the face of the business following a controversial. Angela Freeman was the first to cast a ballot. Meridian will be led by a black lady. In terms of money, her acceptance speech was kind but direct. I'll make sure that each and every customer, worker, and the community we serve has similar experiences. Degree of deference and excellence, no exceptions. These were meaningless statements that, in private, Angela had been following a so unsettling consumer behavior grievances, but overall satisfaction. As we dug deeper, the scores appeared to be good, showed notable differences in service quality in specific branches. Demographics, the figures revealed the tale that the earlier, instead of burying, depending on reports and secondary sources accounts that Angela chose to check for, she uses the undercover boss strategy. It wasn't merely a ploy, it was the sole method of experiencing reality. As it is, unadulterated, her clients were facing the prominent location. Jessica Keller was in charge of downtown management, 15-year veteran who has a remarkable. On paper, her numbers were unusually high, amounts of transactions. Fantastic creation of new accounts, however, something in the row caught Angela's attention. Data. But there weren't many official complaints, Exit interviews with customers revealed that people were departing with varied stories, particularly clients of color citing inadequate service and sentiment. Most wouldn't be welcome when pressed, elaborately just stealing their business. In other places, it was 9:15 a.m. Tuesday. As soon as Angela Freeman entered the Meridian Financial's swinging doors flagship, she had purposefully selected a branch, modest clothing with a basic navy hoodie on, wearing a face cover and black pants, her natural. Her hair had a conservative style, and she wore minimal makeup and carried a well-kept yet non-designer handbag. She seemed to everybody who looked at her to be a middle-class, informal lady who is not the CEO of the full organization. Angela sat down in the apparently inspecting her in the waiting area phone, but in reality watching the dynamics of customer service emerging what she saw in those surroundings. The opening 15 minutes revealed more than 1,000 consumers evaluate a white. A businessman wearing a costly suit came up to the door before he even. A staff member arrived at the counter, stopped him with a nice smile. "Greetings, sir. How may we assist you today?" The man was led straight to a desk, getting around the light completely. Minutes later, an elderly Asian couple went in and were shown to take a number, then wait without smiling. Warmth merely a finger pointing at a young white woman at a dining area. Casual attire got closer to the fast. The banker at the service counter conversed, asking about her in a kind manner. "The weekend plans? Transaction has been finished." Less than 2 minutes, followed by a Hispanic man in work clothing for janitors, moved up to the same counter. All of a sudden, there were further inquiries and requests for several types of identification, and a dubious taken from the teller's straightforward check cashing. Required over 10 minutes. Angela saw the recurrence of this trend, herself 6 times more, before she eventually went up to the counter herself, who had been anticipating 37 minutes, even though the branch was just 3 white consumers who are fairly busy who came after her, had previously been served when Angela eventually arrived. The young woman's window of teller, Beth's grin. "How can I help you?" she asked, faltering. Her voice was far colder than it had been with the former client. "I'd like to please make a withdrawal," Angela urged, slipping her withdrawal slip and ID. The sum across the counter, $115,000. Beth's eyes became a little wider. She looked at the driver's license that Angela had, then glanced at her face before turning back. At the license as though verifying that were in fact the same individual. "This is a tremendous amount," she added, raising her voice. "Only enough to attract the interest of Yaz. It is her colleague at the next window." Angela gently responded, "But everything is okay. Within my account's daily limit." Beth did not reply to her type. Instead, she turned to Mark and said something in a whisper. "The following station's senior teller." Mark looked over, gave a nod, and continued walking, overtaking and placing himself squarely behind. He loomed over the counter Beth. He questioned loudly, "Is there a problem here?" Aimed at Angela and Beth, respectively. Heads turned in the lobby. As patrons gazed, an elderly woman gripped Angela, felt the weight of her purse tightening. Of all eyes in the area, the quiet judgment, the presumption that she must be doing improperly with Angela put her in a position of extraordinary poise. Bank card next to her on the counter, ID, no issue at all. I'm just creating a withdrawal from my account, which Mark selected up her ID, looking at it with a heightened examination. "We've seen some odd activity on these kinds of accounts." He recently emphasized these kinds of just enough to clarify what he means. "We must be extra cautious about the kinds of accounts that would..." That's precisely what Angela asked in her voice. Stable Mark disregarded Beth's query. "Is it possible to retrieve the account history?" "I would like to see what kind of... We're looking for transaction patterns." Beth was tapping at her keyboard. Another employee strayed over. Richard leaned, based on his name tag, in and said to Mark in a whisper, not very silently sufficient, very likely one of the funds. Check cashing or money laundering plans. Richard didn't even attempt to conceal his disdain as he glanced up at Angela and down, observing her modest attire, and all we need is a smirk and natural hair to confirm that the money is indeed yours. Falsely sweet, he murmured. You realize that it's for your protection. This humiliation was thoughtful and methodical, yet Angela remained upright and dignified. Voice firm, I recognize the necessity. For protection, I have a bank card and identification. Client of this financial institution and have been for many years from now. I hope to finish my deal right now. Richard called over at that point, please. The branch manager, Jessica Keller, walked across the lobby while wearing the assurance from someone who had never been questioned her expression throughout her life. Was a deliberate combination of worry and as she walked up to Angela, ma'am, authority, I am aware that there is some misunderstanding. Regarding your request to withdraw, she stated, her voice was filled with condescension. Remark that she failed to introduce herself, didn't ask right away for her name, took up a role of power over her. Angela, I'm not confused at all, said, I'm just attempting to get into my own. Money didn't see Jessica's smile. Eyes 15,000 is a substantial quantity of, could you tell me what cash is? Regarding this query, one that hadn't been requested from a lone white client, making the morning's big trades, hung in the double standard in the air between them, it would have been extremely obvious if they would display a symbol indicating the strain in the air was sufficiently thick to pierce with a knife. Jessica Keller gazed at Angela below. Her expression was a mask of pretended worry. That was insufficient to conceal the contempt. Beneath the busy bank lobby appeared to be silent around them, as though the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. Next, Mrs. Freeman said, at last looking at the ID. She was holding it by the edges, seemingly hesitant to make contact. This amount doesn't seem excessive, suitable for someone such as this bank. Takes pride in its dignity, and we serve a certain class of clients. So we unable to assist you here? It was the mask, had Jessica slid in those few words. Showed what this was about in detail, not security procedures rather than banking rules that are simply unadulterated prejudice disguised as business jargon. Angela had a recognizable constriction in her chest, the identical feeling she'd encountered innumerable times while her career at the time when someone undervalues, rejects, and diminishes all of your life to a stereotype. Behind Jessica, the employees talked. Beth cast sly looks down. Her hands appeared to be uncomfortable, occupying a pile of deposits, slid and didn't require correction. Her uneasiness was evident in her body language. However, by remaining silent, she was complicit in all Richard, and the same Mark didn't care. Actually, Richard is trying to hide their amusement. Laughed and shielded his lips with his hand in a feeble effort to hide his. Richard added, I'm curious, laughing. Resting on the counter while increased self-assurance now that his supervisor was supporting him, his voice carried purposefully, making sure that nearby clients, could you hear if you made any money? A settlement recently, or perhaps a gift? Or perhaps you laundered? The implied money was crystal. They were certain that there was just no acceptable manner for a black lady to have access to such funds. It had to be a windfall of some sort, a stroke of luck instead of intelligence and hard work and resolve of a young white mother with her transaction had been halted by two children. Openly observing the next window scene blossoming, she drew her kids nearer. Something whispered in their ears, instructing them, possibly subconsciously, to consider Angela to be a suspicious individual. Angela, someone who didn't belong, took a big breath. Her poise was amazing. Considering the conditions, not a trace of the anger her expression must have shown how she felt. Would like to talk to someone who can truly assist me in completing my purchase. Please, a person with the power to disregard any worries you may have. Every phrase was picked with care. Professionally reasonable, denying them ammo as a reason not to call her a grumpy or challenging. Jessica's smile tightened a rage-filled flash that crossed her characteristics of being challenged. I hold the highest authority in this, ma'am. Branch, I am the manager. Nobody else is there. She leaned in so you could talk to someone else. Her voice was lowered somewhat to a stage whisper that may still be heard clearly to everyone in the vicinity. Her aroma, costly cologne, that was probably intended to authority and success, lingered throughout the counter. You could be more at ease at the check cashing location. They're more used to that down the street. To take care of your particular banking requirements, you ought to receive perhaps $1,000 or two. The dismissal was so obvious there that it is disrespectful that a group intake customers could be heard gasping for air, who were blatantly listening in on the conversation behind the teller's windows. The bank's regular activities persisted. The cash counters malfunctioned. In the background, subtly, the security cameras installed in every nook and cranny of the ceiling captured every single thing. Expression, each word, each. The manifestation of microaggression in high definition. Angela looked up at one of those in detail. Cameras, a possible flicker of something. Knowing, momentarily crossing her face, that without another word, nobody noticed. Angela reached into her purse and handed it to Jessica. A simple leather purse that had served as a present from her team upon receiving a promotion to swoon, and took out her phone. Pardon me for a moment, she said, taking a small step back. From the counter, while still in the A's, she dialed. Everyone could see her. Richard gave both of them a shove. They were smirking as they watched. Richard said something in a whisper that made Mark suppress a chuckle from Beth the storyteller, who had initially helped Angela maintain her eyes down, but her uneasiness was evident in her shoulders' stiff posture. Is another, an elderly black guy in a postal service uniformed workers observed the scene with an expression of resignation that conveyed volumes, so he wasn't shocked. This was Black? Yeah, this was banking on Tuesday. Hi, Angela answered the phone, voice adopting an even more formal tone than previously. This is Angela Freeman, mimicked Richard's call, her stance excessively erecting oneself with. He was mousing Angela with his nose in the air. Mark was called by Freeman, who suppressed. Richard's performance for the laugh was for the benefit of all employees, a demonstration of Angela's dominance of belonging. The bank's mission statement said that the expense prominently positioned on the rear wall, them achieving financial success, together with respect, trust, and integrity. The statement now appeared to be a hilarious joke that contrasts with the scene. As it happened underneath them, Jessica stepped. She was obviously worn out by her forward patience. Shoes made of polished leather creaked a little over the marble surface while she transferred the sound, strangely loud, in the tense, I must beg you to give me some room. Close your business somewhere else. Causing disruptions within our branch, there will be lower banks available that cannot serve you. The irony here was astonishing. The only thing that disturbed me was the employee's handling of a valid client trying to go into her own money. But in Jessica's thoughts and the thoughts of others who were biased like her, Angela's presence alone, her boldness in expecting equitable treatment was the disruption. Angela carried on with her call as if she hadn't. Yes, I am still in the downtown area. No, they have turned down the transaction. That's right. She's calm. Was disturbing to Jessica's colleagues in her position being refused service because publicly shamed were expected to. There are two ways to respond. Explosive rage that would support defeat or removal, acceptance that might lead to retreat. Then came Angela's calm resistance. It unnerved me, and neither script did. The voice of her mother, Jessica, rose the professionalism's facade crumbling farther. If you remain on the property, I'll have to call right away." Angela, the security guard, averted her gaze a little from her, continuing to talk plainly into the big wall clock in the bank ticked away. Announcement of every second of the 10:17 a.m. was the standoff time, a period when would be documented in a variety of documentation of termination within the hours. To Jessica gestured to Mark, who reached for the extension for the security phone. The circumstances were getting worse by the second. What had other workers stopped? They were observing, sensing that something important was happening. Angela then turned her back on Jessica, and she said her last words to the phonetic terms that would be altered Diane everything in the upcoming moments. "Right now, I need you at the downtown branch." Jessica felt the name physically. "Blow Diane," as in the head of Diane Porter. Activities for the whole bank. Angela know that Angela's direct phone number was. Jessica felt a glimmer of doubt confront the initial rift in her self-assurance false front. Who was this woman in reality, and how did she can get straight to one of the majority of the company's key executives? The query persisted in her thoughts for just a second before her haughtiness reaffirmed. It's probably simply her name being dropped. People like her always felt she was a bluff, attempted to scare with allegations of being aware that influential people hit the "if you support, click the like and subscribe" buttons. In this, Angela, the undercover boss, the headquarter branch's story, Meridian Financial's executive suite, Diane suddenly became active. At her desk, Porter stood erect. Her face was becoming paler as she acknowledged the voice on the other end of the line and recognized the caller. Diane had collaborated with Angela. They had broken for more than 10 years. Together, those innumerable glass ceilings traversed the perilous waters of women of color in corporate finance, encouraged one another through individual. "The obstacles in my career get me every A downtown customer's complaint." She had been barking at the branch for the past year. Her help, everyone, including the ones that was excluded from the formal review process, helper dispersed, while she seized her security badge and tablet. Her high-end shoes made a loud noise on the marble floor while she hurried to the executive elevator that has the potential to bring her straight to the lobby without any pause in the conference room next to it. Board members who had been examining quarterly forecasts discovered themselves abruptly stopped when security feeds were pulled out from the downtown branch. On the primary, Jonathan questioned, "What's happening on the screen?" Prescott, the board's chairman, as the technicians rushed to improve the viewers. "You must view this, sir," responded the security chief's grim expression. Prescott's face lost its color as he acknowledged that the woman was being mistreated by their Angela Freeman is the staff member in question. Another board member stuttered, "Which is our yes." The security director did confirm, "CEO, and it appears that this has been occurring." Already 17 minutes on screen, they could watch everything happen in real time. In startled silence, the board observed, as their CEO received disdainful treatment in anything in her own bank records. Prescott tightened his voice with hardly little, mastered every word and every second of fury. "And get up here legally. Back in the bank lobby right away." The temperature appeared to dip a few degrees as Jessica started to understand that there was a serious problem with her face was devoid of confidence, substituted by the initial flickers of she and her employees are unaware of the uncertainty. Additionally, the security cameras had recorded how they handle other clients. Throughout the morning, the trend of the discrimination. Angela had seen directly witnessing each and every encounter, give each favorable treatment separately. Now the service was kept as proof. The same mechanism intended to safeguard the bank from outside dangers was going to reveal the danger that existed within everybody. Angela Freeman stood flawlessly along the phone, is still in her purse now. Observing the gradual realization, Jessica Keller's face revealed that she may have just committed the greatest error. of her professional life on the 21st level of chaos at Meridian Financial's headquarters. The executive suite was where the typically peaceful viewing space where all branches' security feds were. The monitored had changed into a the war room. Pulls up in a few minutes. Diane Porter, we have every perspective. Her voice was strained with commanded the chief of operations. Fury stood very erect in her fitted navy outfit, and her typical calm manner substituted with a level of passion that had her employees are acting with never before seen urgency. I want facial recognition and audio. Desire timestamps to be included. The security team rushed through everything to follow her instructions with her fingers flying over keyboards while they tucked, displaying several camera angles of the city center lobby screens in the branch that are crowded with several perspectives of the same degrading scenario where their CEO, Angela Freeman, is handled as though she were a criminal in her own camera. 3 at the institution has the clearest. According to audio, a young technician, his face turned pale when he recognized the seriousness of what they were seeing. And we have an ongoing video from at 9:15 she walked into the branch morning. In the nearby boardroom, 3 board members with a history of observed the quarterly planning meeting. Astonished quiet while the security feeds filled the wall-sized displays, allowing them to view all the smirks, eye rolls, and the obvious disregard, the disparate treatment of clients who only consider appearances. There was no denying the pattern, and it was unfolding in real time prior to their yes eyes, Jonathan Prescott said. The board chairman's grim expression, it's ours, beneath his silver hair. CEO, the audio stream began as soon as, according to Jessica Keller, these checks caching locations are much superior. Her voice is ready for your requirements. Condescension was flowing from this wasn't just a terrible customer in the boardroom service. This went beyond simple rudeness, was the institutionalized prejudice they had all persuaded themselves that they didn't exist within their. This is taking place in our institution. Catherine was murmured by flagship branch. Reynolds, the 3rd board member in attendance, she didn't have to complete the inquiry. The question of how many hovered in the air. This treatment was experienced by other clients. How many people had just left each day, never moving their operations to another location, submitting grievances that never escalate to, "Man, get me anything we own about Jessica, please." Diane Keller snarled at her helper. When she gathered her security and tablet badge, work history, and performance, examines every customer concerns. Then give legal a call and request a meeting. She hurried downstairs in 15 minutes. Diane scrolled toward the elevator, bringing up branch on her tablet analysis of the downtown branches. The screen was packed with performance metrics. Remarkable at first look, top-tier new creation of a strong loan account, origination numbers, outstanding deposit expansion, but after she added filters to break down the data by client. Demographics. The real picture became apparent. Unquestionably, the patterns were concealed in obvious in their own data. The branch with the highest account was Jessica's. Minorities, applicants, rejection rate, the lowest approval rate for loans for Black entrepreneurs, and a client rate of attrition among individuals of color. That was 3 times the average for the bank. Had they overlooked this, or had they just decided not to see the tensions in the branch lobby were becoming worse the moment Jessica had called a young security guard? Thomas, a man who peered closely, scarcely uneasy with the circumstances, 25, brand new to the position and obviously prepared for the complexity of moral issues, that he was asked if he needed this. Jessica, a woman who was taken off the property, told not to gaze at Angela like though she wasn't a person. She was an item. There was complete conviction in her voice, of a person who had never encountered her questioning authority. Within these walls, she is making a commotion and refusing to go after being turned away. The security guard hesitated to provide service, obviously feeling that something wasn't roughly the situation. His eyes shifted between his technical superior, Jessica, and Angela, whose poise was in stark contrast to, as opposed to the manager's expanding commotion. Sir Angela calmly addressed the guard. I'm quite entitled to be here. A client of this bank is making an effort to access my personal money. I've given all necessary identification and have violated Thomas. The security has no laws or regulations. The guard moved his weight from one foot to the other. To another, obviously disagreed with what his schooling had taught him, procedures for robberies and emergencies processes, but he was unprepared. For this morally dubious, Jessica's face, ma'am, flushed with frustration, with the guard's hesitancy, and that confronted with contradictions, employees, this is a private company, and we retain the authority to deny service to someone who might be trying to commit. The accusation of fraud hung in the air. Without proof and without a foundation, Jessica had achieved one of the highest levels of grave accusations that may be made in a banking surroundings, and yet to those who observed the real scam was getting more and more evident that the equal service fraud of the staff's meritocracy of fairness created a physical barrier behind Jessica. Mark is standing with his arms folded, security badge twisted in reverse, revealing his Richard's name was hidden, and he had a contented grin spinning a pen between his fingers in a casual motion disdain. And even Beth, who had appeared uncomfortable before, now standing in camaraderie with her co-workers. But her gaze stayed focused on the floor. The message was unambiguous, and all of them presenting a united front against Angela of institutional authority, in opposition to a one client whose lone transgression was anticipating to receive basic respect for other patrons in the establishment, had observed the conflict that some people feigned to concentrate on their own deals, their eyes flashing. Occasionally others moved toward the situation, observed candidly, their faces varied from uneasiness to intense fascination, with the dramatic events involving a middle-aged white man who was in queue to wait, stepped forward, making his way into the circumstance with someone's trust, who had never doubted his authority to take up any available space. Listen, lady, he added, we have actual banking to do today. Making impatient gestures if you are not leaving, or at least halting the cause. The irony was that everyone else was having problems. Anguished, Angela considered the innumerable discussions in which she had stressed customer satisfaction as the foundation in their business plan, the instruction initiatives she had supported, the projects for inclusion that she had provided funding for, all apparently useless in the face of deeply rooted prejudices that no corporate memo could eliminate. Instead of rather than quarrel, Angela raised her in silence, phone, and proceeded to record the increasing circumstances. She captured the expressions of the security guard and crew discomfort that the client is experiencing interference. Everything was kept intact with crystal. Every second of the video was clear. One more nail in the career coffin constructed upon prejudice. Jessica observed the recording, and her face became serious. Additionally, her temples vein throbbed, apparent as she battled to keep authority over a situation that was quickly. Photography that slips through her fingertips is prohibited in the bank, and this is yet another transgression of our policies. In fact, Angela responded to her steady voice, per Meridian Fanon, its own area on customer service policy 4.3. Clients are entitled to record any conversation in which they feel their rights are being infringed upon. Her knowledge's specificity was captured. Jessica caught me off surprise, but only briefly. Questions were starting to arise behind her eyes. To determine this woman's identity, how exactly did she know the company's policies? How did she have Diane in such detail? Porter's phone number, but instead, think about these questions. Then take a moment to reconsider the circumstances. Jessica's expression changed to an ugly smirk as she faced the employees and safety. This is precisely what I mean, guard. Regarding what she said loud enough for to hear these, everyone in the lobby. People are constantly attempting to cheat on the system. People enter here believing that understand the regulations better than we do for any weakness to exploit the mask had fallen entirely. There is no longer any pretense of security, issues or banking procedures in their most basic form. The complete demonstration of prejudice was recorded. On the bank's own security for eternity, Angela's phone customers and the system were either observing with morbid interest or deliberately averting one's gaze while acting as though see the scene that is developing before them, including some of the employees were starting to move uneasily as Jessica's actions became more and more. The appearance of professionalism is inconsistent, bursting to expose the bias below Richard, whose derision had been so open previously, now uncertainly darted looks at his boss. This was happening, crossing farther than he had anticipated. Even he knew that certain lines shouldn't be crossed in a professional manner. Beth, the teller's surroundings, who had first helped Angela take a look at her body, she had an ashy complexion as she saw the intensification of what had started as a custom transaction. She had adhered to protocol, called her manager because it was necessary for a big withdrawals, but this public customer humiliation wasn't what. The only person she had signed up for was Mark. Unwavering in his defense of Jessica's stiff posture and crossed arms as a physical expression of the institutional obstacles Angela has encountered throughout her career, Angela Freeman remained motionless in the middle of her dignity, was unharmed by this storm, waiting for the moment's wait to not only for herself, but for each and every client who had ever experienced rudeness or dismissal, denied access to services because of her looks rested on her. The elevator chime sounded on the shoulders. Jessica's head can be seen dimly in the distance, turned momentarily in response to the sound. Something in the air had altered, similar to the drop in pressure before a storm. Meridian's magnificent twin doors, flagship financials branch, exploded so forcefully that they slammed. The sound against the walls echoing through the lobby's marble floors. Every head turned like a thunderclap as Diane Porter walked confidently into the room, her presence that demands urgent pay attention to the operations. Chief second. In charge of the entire company, moved with the concentrated vigor of someone preparing to put out a fire. Her voice instantly conveyed the weight of supreme authority, rather than a request, not a recommendation, a directive. That everyone was immobilized by Jessica Keller's face changed from one of annoyance to bewilderment when she realized the executive, in the 15 years she had overseen Diane Porter, had visited this branch. Maybe 3 times a day is always planned. Weeks ahead of time, always with the official plan for her sudden presence. The anger in her step set off the initial genuine glimmer of terror in her eyes. The employees who had created a wall of solidarity for Jessica's few moments abruptly found oneself unsure, marks crossed, and Richard's smirk disappeared. Beth's arms fell to his sides, and he looked as even if she might lose the color. Completely drained from her face, Jessica tried to take back command of the circumstance. She stepped with her hair smoothed. Moving forward with a seasoned client, Miss Porter, what a service smile. Unexpected joy exists. Something. Do you know who this is? Diane cut her off, pointing at Angela, who maintained her composure. The question persisted in the midst of the confusion. There was a lot of implied meaning in the air. Jessica looked from Diane to Angela and back. Uncertainty giving place to the initial intensity of fear that her thoughts rushed through. Perhaps she was a friend of Diane, is a board member's relative, a possible high net worth banking regulator, valuable customer they had been attempting to attract. The branch's other patrons had ceased any pretense of carrying out their own company. Some of them had their phones out, capturing the dispute with an elderly woman who had observed the entire situation and nodded in contentment as though justice had finally receiving service. The security guard, Thomas, took a purposeful distance from Jessica, naturally removing oneself from what he realized was the incorrect side. Diane, of history, went up to Angela, and whole manner, changing as she did. Her justifiable rage had been directed at Jessica, yielded to deep admiration, as she spoke to the woman who had previously handled as shamefully. I sincerely apologize to you. Encountered this particularly when he heard her said, her voice echoing through the lobby was silent. So she turned back to her. Expression hardens as she faces the personnel. Again, she made her voice heard. Angela Freeman is ringing with authority. Your employer, the CEO of Meridian Financial. The words struck like blows to the body. Jessica stumbled back as it hit her. Richard quickly put his hand to his mouth, eyes going wide with fear, as the awareness of his actions and the person he had drained and sunk in Mark's face. His Adam's apple was bobbing in all colors. He swallowed several times, and Beth started too. She trembles and tears welling in her eyes from the Grand Prix 3 months prior. The city's most renowned ballroom, Angela Freeman, had been standing on a hotel stage under crystal chandeliers and took the ceremonial Meridian key. The room had been packed with financial press, financial leaders, and dignitaries, all participants in a momentous occasion, as she took the lead as the first black woman. A list of the top 10 national. Jessica Keller of the bank had observed the ceremony live on the internet during she had graciously praised the staff meeting, along with her group, made the necessary remarks regarding leadership and progress, and it seemed that she had forgotten after that, because of the undercover, or decided against, acknowledge her own CEO's face when she walked into her. We have been observing Diane Branch kept displaying her tablet on the screen. Security footage from all the day was played in crystal clear definition. We have observed how you treat Mrs. Freeman. Others, the iPad showed a split screen. Parallels between a white customers. Huge withdrawals are handled with joy and effectiveness, in contrast to the same request from a Hispanic customer seen with mistrust and investigation as a rich-looking client who was escorted straight to a workplace as an older black. The woman had to wait 40 minutes for basic support for each and every contact. In this, Diane's voice was recorded on the branch, tense with restrained rage in each and every one. And the events of today are a discriminatory tendency that is so obvious, that's so horrible, that it not only transgresses our corporate guidelines but federal banking rules. She started enumerating the infractions of one another in a methodical manner. The final nail in Jessica's career coffin: disparate treatment, according to perceived socioeconomic status or race disregard for standard verification procedures uniformly throughout all customers, fostering an antagonistic atmosphere for a customer trying to get into their own money and accusing a client of possible fraud without supporting documentation. Jessica's expression had taken on a frightening red hue of the meticulously built. Her professional persona's facade was disintegrating in front of everyone's eyes. There is a miscommunication, she stammered as she straightened her hair once again. Now a nervous habit instead of a power move. We're worried about our security. With significant cash withdrawals, the procedures save it. Diane interrupted her. Examined the video of 3 comparable withdrawals that were handled earlier today for other clients. The only protocol you continuously adhered to was discrimination. Richard came forward, tears pouring down his cheeks. Former assurance was replaced with desperate self-preservation. Was all I was doing? He begged, we're trained. Jessica's lead to exercise caution when dealing with strange transactions. Mark tried a different into his voice, adopting a tone of, there have been professional concerns, scams that target this branch. We were only engaging in proper, be careful in line. We have access to each and every email. Remember, each and every message you've sent through the computers of this bank. Diane, don't let interruptions make this worse. For by resting in the main entryway, you reopened as three participants in the board of directors walked into the lobby. Their solemn Jonathan expressions, Dennis and Catherine Reynolds Prescott Whitehill, the top leadership in addition to Angela, the business had leave their executive suite and descend to observe the reckoning firsthand. Their presence improved what was previously a disastrous incident for Jessica and her team to something that has never been done. In the members of the bank's historical board just did not show up on the front lines of everyday activities till something extraordinary required that they personal attention at the lobby. Already in some way silence turned into even quieter patrons gazed with keen eyes as the most influential individuals in the group positioned itself in a semicircle around Angela. Is a tangible example of the assistance that ought to have been provided to everyone during the conflict. Angela had kept quiet while observing, not with contentment or validation, but with the objective evaluation of seeing the systemic failure as a leader that needed to be corrected. But this wasn't for her, it was institutional rather than personal. Because it is her duty to respond, when she did speak, her tone was composed, measured, and transported the obvious weight of absolute. Jessica Richard Mark, the authority, said, speaking to each of them individually, making intentional eye contact, "You are terminated with immediate effect." No elevated voice, without becoming theatrical gesture that is straightforward and unquestionable. Use of authority by a person with gained the authority to use it as your. Today's activities have shown that you are essentially dissimilar to the principles of this organization and the law standards for ethical banking. Angela went on to say, "This is not a suspension or an improvement in performance chance. This marks the conclusion of your working for Meridian." Jessica's face, twisted with financial shock, is a complex blend of emotions, humiliation, rage, and ultimately the growing awareness that her career of 15 years had finally come to an end in an amazing, you are the result of her own public failure. Not only did she start, but Angela raised her hand a little and she became quiet. "I can, and I have, right now," she remarked. "Just Thomas," she gave the security guard a nod. The guard, who had been observing the situation, "Open your mouth and escort these former workers, should gather their individual possessions." And then, leaving the Thomas, straightened his posture and nodded. "Yes, ma'am," with a newly discovered purpose as the three were humiliated by security. Workers in the direction of the back offices to gather the rest of their belongings. Customers and employees stared in disbelief. There was no cheering, just silence. Celebration, only the serious observation of responsibility being upheld at the greatest level. The teller, Beth, who had started the interaction but had displayed uneasiness behind her, shaking all the way. Counter, obviously anticipating being the next, Angela came up to her and the kids. The woman prepared herself for what was going to happen. Rather, Angela whispered to her that most people couldn't hear the words in the lobby. However, Beth's face changed from fear to perplexity to caution. She repeatedly nodded in relief while wiping. She would later shed tears from her cheeks. Learned that Beth had been put on probation, as opposed to ended her readiness to admit her errors and her obvious uncomfortable with the actions of her co-workers been observed by Angela, and she would appear in security footage as one of the most outspoken internal supporters of the bank for fair treatment in the months to appear like Mark and Jessica Richard did. Escorted P, while the clients continued to waiting in the lobby for their individual things crammed into cardboard boxes. The entire weight of everything that happened appeared to settle on everyone. This wasn't only a dramatic moment fire. It was a declaration made in public about what is acceptable and unacceptable in this organization's future. Angela Freeman was positioned in the middle of the branch, with the name of her business encircled by the group of leaders that had really acknowledged her worth perspective of clients who have now realized precisely who was leading them. Bank, the change was finished. From being refused service to working out the highest authority regarding the message couldn't have been sent in minutes. More blatant discrimination was inappropriate in Meridian Monetary, and those responsible for its continuation had no prospect there, with the termination of workers were escorted out of the a thick stillness hung over the building. Meridian Financial's main office customers and employees stayed put, behind their counters, frozen in place. Angela Freeman was the center of attention as she surveyed what was now undeniably her domain. When Angela finally addressed the remaining staff, her voice carried not anger but resolve, the clear, steady tone of a leader who had identified a problem and was already formulating its solution. What happened today isn't just about three individuals making poor choices. She began gathering the shell-shocked employees in a semicircle around her. It's about a culture that allowed those choices to seem acceptable, a culture we are going to transform starting right now. The staff listened with rapt attention, many unable to meet her eyes, others nodding in shame-faced acknowledgement of truths they had long recognized but never confronted. Meridian Financial exists to serve all customers with dignity, respect, and fairness. These aren't just words on our mission statement. They are the standard by which every interaction will be measured moving forward. As she spoke, Diane Porter was already on her tablet, initiating emergency protocols rarely used in the bank's history, transferring management authority, securing access credentials, establishing temporary leadership until permanent replacements could be found. Every branch, every department, every role in this organization will be evaluated, not just on profitability, but on equitable service. Angela continued the metrics we value reflect the company we want to be. Beth, the young teller who had initiated the interaction with Angela but had shown visible discomfort throughout the ordeal, stood trembling at the edge of the group. When Angela approached her, tears streamed down the young woman's face. "I'm so sorry," Beth whispered, voice breaking. "I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know what to do." When Jessica and the others, rather than dismissing the apology or offering easy absolution, Angela listened intently, recognizing the crucial moment for what it was, a genuine opening for change, learning to stand up against wrongdoing, even when it comes from authority figures, is one of the hardest skills to develop. Angela told her, but it's also one of the most valuable. What happened next would become part of Meridian Financial's corporate lore, a moment referred to in training sessions and leadership seminars for years to come. Angela Freeman, CEO of one of the nation's largest financial institutions, looked at the tearful young teller and saw not just remorse but potential. "Beth, effective immediately, you're being promoted to interim branch manager." The guests from the staff were audible. Beth's eyes widened in shock. "But you're someone who recognized that what was happening was wrong, even if you didn't have the tools or confidence to stop it." Angela cut in, "That awareness is the foundation we need to build on. You'll have support, training, and resources. But more importantly, you'll bring the perspective of someone who has seen firsthand how things can go wrong and is committed to making them right." 3 days later, Angela stood behind a podium and blazoned with Meridian Financial's logo facing a sea of journalists, cameras, and recording devices. The press conference had been hastily arranged, but was meticulously choreographed to deliver a powerful message. "Today, Meridian Financial is announcing our new equitable banking initiative." Angela stated her professional attire, and commanding presence, a stark contrast to the modest clothing she had worn during her undercover visit. This comprehensive program represents an investment of $50 million in anti discrimination training, community outreach, and internal accountability systems. The board members flanked her on the stage, their unified presence a public demonstration of institutional commitment. What the journalist didn't know was how contentious the emergency board meeting had been, with several members initially balking at the scale of investment and the public admission of fault it represented. It had taken Angela laying out the legal, financial, and reputational risks of inaction, along with the security footage from the branch, to bring the holdouts around. Now they stood beside her, at least outwardly committed to the transformation she envisioned. Banking discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. Angela continued, her words echoing through the conference hall. When we fail to serve all communities equitably, we leave talent, undeveloped businesses unfunded, and potential unrealized. The cameras hand across the diverse group of individuals seated in the front row, former customers of Meridian, who had experienced discrimination firsthand and had agreed to share their stories as part of the initiative. There was Michael Mandel, a successful entrepreneur whose loan application had been denied 3 times despite an impeccable business plan and credit history. Beside him sat Elena Rodriguez, who had been steered away from premium services despite qualifying based on her income, and James Chen, whose attempt to open a business account had been met with excessive documentation requirements not demanded of other clients. These brave individuals, Angela's acknowledged them with a gesture, have agreed to serve on our newly established Client Equity Advisory Board, ensuring that lived experiences inform our policies moving forward. The press conference would make national news not just for the unprecedented admission of discriminatory practices by a major financial institution, but for the concrete, measurable commitments made to address them in the weeks and months that followed. Angela Freeman became the face of corporate accountability in America. Her unwavering implementation of the promised changes, from revised hiring practices to overhauled performance metrics to community investment programs, demonstrated that her commitment went far beyond damage control. Branch managers found their bonuses tied to equity metrics alongside traditional performance indicators. Anonymous customer experience surveys were disaggregated by demographic data to identify disparities. Training programs were redesigned with input from civil rights organizations and banking regulators, and in every Meridian branch a new sign appeared inside the teller. Windows, all customers deserve respect, dignity, and fair service. If your experience does not reflect these values, please call this number. Below was Angela Freeman's direct office line 6 months after the incident that transformed Meridian Financial. Angela once again donned casual clothing and visited branches unannounced, but this time her purpose wasn't to expose discrimination, it was to witness the changes taking root throughout the organization. If you enjoyed the story, hit the like and subscribe button and share to others so they can learn from this story too.